quality of our nation by the opportunities we offer to poor children.
For we, the people, understand that our country cannot succeed when a shrinking few do very well and a growing many barely make it. We are true to our creed when a little girl born into the bleakest poverty knows that she has the same chance to succeed as anybody else because she is an American, she is free, and she is equal not just in the eyes of God, but also in our own.
So that moment gave me pause, Ralph, because on the one hand he's saying the critical measure of our nation is when we look at a child, particularly a girl child, in the bleakest poverty, what her opportunities are is how we should measure ourselves. So how are we doing?
Well, we're doing not very well. If you're poor in this country, at some point in time, you're going to be homeless. And you're going to be homeless, you're going to have an impact if you're a child on your education. And the more episodes you have of homelessness, if you're back into the system, as someone mentioned to me, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the probability of you falling behind, not completing school, increases dramatically. This is an issue where we must realize that education is the key, and education may not be the only chance for poor kids in this country, but it's the best chance. And that's where the resources have to go.
It's interesting. It's a challenge that we face, you know, for example, on a show like this where we want to talk about it, but then of course the young people who we can go and find to talk about it are those who have found themselves on the other side of the curve, in part because that's then who's available to us, and there's a way in which it becomes difficult to get to the crux of it. Just 2 weeks ago we had the new freshman Congresswoman Kirsten Sinema here on the show, and she stayed and talked a little bit about her own experiences of homelessness afterward. I want to listen to that and ask you a question, Bob. Sure.
When I was a kid, my dad was an attorney. We were actually a middle-class family. And during the early 1980s, my dad lost his job during the Great, at that time, a big recession. And we went from being middle-class to poor almost overnight, and ended up being homeless, lived without running water or electricity for 2 years.
So my dad was an attorney, we were middle class, we lost our job in a great recession of the 80s, we went to homelessness. That is a story for a lot of Americans right now.
That's what we need to keep in mind. At the bottom of this homeless crisis that we have in this country is the employment crisis that we still have in this country. Individuals and families are homeless for the most part because they don't have employment or they don't have jobs that pay enough to pay for rent or to buy a home. So we need to address. There's so many issues to address, but we really need to address the fundamental issue of employment.
Employment and economic opportunity. Derek, you are now at a point where, as a young man, you're starting to think about employment and economic opportunity and all of that. What are the lessons you will take from your own experiences of homelessness as you move forward?
Anything that I want is possible. I'm such a believer in that. That if I put my heart in it, my mind in it, if I work at it, and if I self-educate as well as look for education,
don't laugh, Eli.
Definitely go far. I think that's a big factor for me, and I want to say that to all homeless kids, that you have to really start taking the steps to start to make the change, and once you do that, the help will be available to you. You just have to be ready to receive it.
Eboni, would you underline those same kinds of ideas?
Oh, absolutely. One of the main things I'm going to take from my experiences into adulthood is that anything is possible. You know, like even in a hard economic time, and there's all these negative things that come on the news, and you know, I've been through enough to know that just enough hard work and determination can get you pretty far. So.
Jimmy, let me ask you also on this question, because I know you've seen it both from your experience but also from your organizing and your own work. On the one hand, the story about the structural difficulties, and on the other about individual perseverance. How do we balance those?
I completely agree. I think your struggle makes you stronger. And if you invest yourself into something that you truly love, whether that be advocacy or whatever you're into, I think success is just a step away. And also, very important, is someone who's there to support you along the way.
You know, what I appreciate about all three of you is I know part of our job as policymakers and as media is to point out those structural inequities and to change it so that it is not so hard. But I also appreciate that you all embody that thing that President Obama talked about, that sense of somehow, even in the bleakest of circumstances, that you have something inside of you. We celebrate that no matter what those structural circumstances are. Thank you to Jimmy Ramirez in Washington. And we're going to have more. Thank you, Jimmy. We're going to have more in just a moment. But first, it is time for a preview of Weekends with Alex Witt, and it is hosted by